Are your customers asking you about programmatic SEO? Is it like a fad? What's going on there?
Oh, yeah. We get asked about it all the time. And I think it's because it sounds so simple and easy and it's too good to be true. I put it this way. If you have a proprietary data set, if you have unique data that you can surface on these pages, similar to like the Zillow's estimate or like the walk score, like then that gives your page something unique. But if your goal with programmatic SEO is to chat GPT your way to 5,000 pages that don't provide unique value, I don't think you're in for a really good time. I think Google also is clearly very aware that you can use these tools to mass generate content. And I don't actually think they care if it's written by a human or if it's written by a robot, because back in the day, you could use, I think it was called like OLARC. So if you have a data source of great, unique, valuable information that makes sense for every zip code or every city or every state or every town, do it. But if you don't, and you're just trying to wedge yourself in there, then I don't think that's the right move. And especially with these companies like, oh, we're going to do programmatic SEO on like 50 pages.
Hi, and welcome to the Optimized Podcast. My name is Nate Matherson, and I'm your host. On this weekly podcast, we sit down with some of the smartest minds in content marketing, SEO, and go-to-market. Our goal is to give you perspective and insights on what's moving the needle in organic search. Today, I'm thrilled to sit down with JH Scherck. JH is the founder of Growth Plays, an SEO agency for growing B2B technology companies. JH was actually on the pod about a year ago, and I'm excited to have him back. On today's episode, JH and I will chat about the recent algorithm updates, creating unique and helpful content, tools, how they should and shouldn't be used, and so much more. Thanks for listening to this week's episode of the Optimized Podcast. It's brought to you by Positional. If you don't know by now, my name's Nate, and I'm one of the co-founders of Positional. And we've built what I think is a pretty awesome tool set for content marketing and SEO teams. We've got tools for keyword research, internal linking, content optimization, and even a couple tools for analytics. We'd love for you to check it out at positional.com. JH, thanks so much for coming on this week's episode of the Optimized Podcast.
Nate, thank you so much for having me. Glad to be here.
You know, it's time flies. Time flies. I mean, you were one of our first guests on the Optimized Podcast. Thank you again for coming on. And thank you again for coming back. It was one of my favorite episodes because you work with some really interesting companies, like companies that are scaling. They're in B2B, often pretty high profile startups. And you've got a great perspective on what's working. But, you know, the first question I usually ask our guests is tell us about yourself. But I already know who you are. I think most of our listeners will know who you are, too. So what's the latest in your world? What have you been up to in the last year?
Yeah, short answer is a lot. Longer answer is I think search is clearly changing. And what worked really well a few years ago, and this is a recurring theme in search, like it's always a moving target. Things are always evolving. But I'd say with the advent of, or the introduction of AI overviews and some of the changes in layouts with paid, how it can have like now a snippet and then 3 paid results. And then, you know, you have to do like scroll all the way down the page to see the second organic listing. We've really tried to change how we approach content. And I think typically where we started was like, oh, what's like the highest traffic term we can go for? And then what are the other pieces that associate to that? Sort of a modified hub and spoke model of like filling out a topic. And the thing I've realized is like, if the AI overview can answer your question, why click through? And really trying to take things more to what I call like the tactical or the tactile, meaning like, tell me how to do it very specifically, or give me the tools or the process or the template that I need in order to do the thing. So less what is it, more how do I do it? And that is actually requiring much more effort to execute on, because explaining what something is a lot easier than giving people hands-on advice on how to do that function. And what we're finding is more collaboration with product marketing, with solutions engineers, with people who live and breathe the product versus just mashing together some title tags and questions and filling out an article that kind of doesn't really help the person take action or dive deeper. So I'd say more from a first principles perspective, like how is this content going to help people accomplish their jobs to be done? And typically, if their job to be done is as simple as a definition, that content might as well not exist. And I think that you hear these buzzwords about like firsthand experience and deep expertise, but actually getting an organization to do that is really tough. And I'd say, like, I'm not going to use anyone as an example other than me, but like when I first got my start, my first in-house job as a WP engine, I'd like use WordPress some, but I wasn't an expert. And I couldn't tell you like how to speed up a WordPress site tactic by tactic. What we did do is work with one of the leading support people there, Ryan. I'm going to slaughter his last name. It's like 50 letters long. It's Norwegian or Icelandic or something, but he wrote this amazing guide on like how to speed up a WordPress site, and it got downloaded a ton. And it's like, that's because he had lived and breathed that experience. He could share that. That was very serendipitous because he just like wanted to help out with marketing and he was a really nice guy. But now that things are sort of like, I'll just say things are tighter now, like budgets are tighter. There's more stress. There's more pressure inside of the types of companies that we work with. It's just it's just harder. Like everyone's trying to do more with less. And what that means is buying less tools. So it means there's less budget going around. So just being like, oh, hey, like solutions engineer, can you come and like do something that totally doesn't relate to any of your goals and just help us? Like that collaboration is getting tougher. So what we're seeing is like the bar for what is going to be meaningful content that'll resonate with your audience and drive like the desired outcome, whether that's getting email opt-ins or signups or trials or whatever. That's getting harder to do, but the ability to pull people in that aren't in a marketing role to help is getting tougher. Not in every org, but in a lot. So I think like the bars are raising, but the actual materials that you have or the resources that you have is getting tighter. So that's been a balancing act for us to figure out.
Yeah. And just quick question before I play it back to you. Do you create content for your clients, or you typically like coach them as to what types of content to create? Maybe you'll review it, but do you guys don't typically actually create the content for your clients, do you?
No, I'm pretty against that business model, just to be direct. Like, and I have a lot of respect for the people that decide to go out and create content on behalf of customers. Like I have a lot of respect for the Animals team, the Megawatt team, the Argot team. I personally think that the future of content is parasocial relationships and that people want to understand who they're learning from. And when there's a game of telephone with every agency. And like I run an agency, we're not perfect. Some things, some nuances of the product, some values of the product get lost on us, I'd say. And that's just part of, shifting to third-party contractors or third-party labor. So we try and work with in-house content creators who deeply know the product and their customer and their space and can speak about it from a point of authority versus trying to kind of mash it together and figure it out and feign that authority.
Just to play it back to you, it sounds like from a keyword standpoint, maybe AI overviews have changed the game in terms of prioritization. Maybe we're not going after as many definitional terms as we used to. From a content standpoint, the bar is now higher in terms of like the value or experience we're providing to that searcher that lands on our page. And there's a whole bunch of different ways to do that or to provide a more valuable experience. Maybe it is unique insights, like you said, or like deep knowledge that we can extract from a member of the team that is otherwise non-existing in today's top SERPs. I agree with you. When I first started in SEO like 10, 11 years ago, it was really just a volume game. And then I think around like 2018, 2019 is when I think that Google started paying more attention to quality. At least that's how it felt to me. But yeah, today I find myself saying something very similar to our customers, like, what is your piece of content adding to the internet? And if you can't answer that question, like it's probably not going to rank as well as it could. And with my blog posts, I've actually found that you can like cut through the competition on some pretty competitive keywords by just going like that extra mile. And just an example from our site, like I think we're on the first page for like backlinks now. And like our website has no business ranking for the keyword backlinks. But like in that piece of content, I wrote it in a way that I hope people feel like they're having a conversation with Nate. That is kind of the lens I've taken with our content. But yeah, so it sounds like content maybe is also becoming like more cross-functional or to create it. Would you say that's right?
Cross-functional, potentially, but what I'd say is we're getting into this concept of like, why are we doing this? And I don't really love the term like mission statement, but what we're trying to work with companies to figure out is like, why are we doing this beyond a traffic grab? Because if all we're trying to go for is traffic, what we're going to do is start trying to find efficiencies that typically lead to like less quality just to like meet that bar and rank, but then that has negative downstream impacts. So I think if traffic is the incentive, it leads to like misaligned incentives. So what we're trying to figure out is like, what are we trying to be? And, I know from your time at Contain IQ, you all ran a very solid blog. We work in that space a lot, like K8s and cloud migrations and whatnot, monitoring. With one customer we're working with right now, we want to become the best place to prepare for a cloud migration. Like if you are going to do a cloud migration, you want to go there. And early in my career, I got sat down and read the Beginner's Guide to SEO from Moz. It wasn't like I Googled Beginner's Guide to SEO. My boss literally was like, hey, to have a base layer foundation, you need to read this. And that's that's what we're going for. That word of mouth, like that's the site to go for, and trying to build out that purpose with these companies. Because if you aspire to something like being the number one resource in your industry for X function or to prepare for some type of big initiative, that's something that you can really rally behind versus like, oh, we're just doing SEO. We're going to execute on these pages, have them live in a place of the site no one's going to find. It's sort of like our secret traffic hub that is totally disconnected from brand, but more if you can align it to like bigger company goals, I think you can get more buy-in and actually lead people to create something more meaningful.
Yeah. And then there's probably so many other places that deserve that content to be shared too, I would think as well. And maybe we can extract additional value from it from non-organic search where otherwise maybe we couldn't previously. And yeah, when I was building our Kubernetes blog, my approach was to just create like the definitive guide to every problem you could have with Kubernetes. And so if you had a question, you didn't have to go to search. You could just come to our site and use the search and hopefully find that answer to your question. That was my thought process when building that blog. And so I want to focus on something you said. So it sounds like in this new era of, AI overviews, changing search landscape, maybe there's less traffic that we get from organic search, but maybe there's like, could we argue that traffic could be higher quality then if we're focusing on, a subset of keywords where people actually need to go deeper or need to take action versus like a lot more traffic that might just not ever convert. Does that feel right?
Yeah, I'd say I think the value of a visit is going up specifically from organic over time. And I'd say like the other thing that's really changing is I'm in the middle of doing monthly reporting right now. This is the first full week of the month. And what we are seeing is traffic from these like generative AI sources like Perplexity and ChatGPT and Gemini and Copilot. That traffic is highly engaged, and it's not just landing on the homepage. It's also landing on like quote unquote SEO content, and the conversion rates from there can be pretty darn high, like seeing some in the 10 to 20% range. So I think like traffic sources are being diversified, but all these visits, if you can, I don't want to say the traffic's more engaged, because I think like if the content is low quality, it's not going to suddenly make it a better visit, or it's not because there's fewer of them. But I think there's an opportunity for companies that really want to create something like on the level that like Lenny Rachinsky from like Lenny's newsletter creates, like things that people really feel it's worth their attention. I think that's going to be like a highly, highly engaged audience. And the issue is I think we as an industry have oversaturated the internet with like mid-level content that really isn't worth anyone's time, but is just being executed so we can get like a few more clicks every month. And It's the wrong incentive. So I think that like bigger goal leads to better content and more traffic, and traffic that can deeply engage and deeply learn.
Yeah. And, I don't use ChatGPT as a research tool. Like I still use Google, like if I have a question, but I use tools like ChatGPT if I'm trying to like do something, like if I'm trying to like produce an output or like, get an output that will help me accomplish one of the tasks on my list. And so maybe that makes sense that the traffic that you could get from a ChatGPT would be more likely to convert because people are trying to actually accomplish something versus to just research something. Could that be right?
I think so. It's really interesting. I'd love there to be like a larger study on like how are people using these tools. I'll say this, I'm not writing SQL myself anymore. Regex, very rarely am I writing that unless it's super simple. Like if it's like complex regex, I'll have ChatGPT try and figure it out. And then when it comes to like advice on certain things or like poking holes through logical arguments or tell me what I don't know about what I've put together, I find it really helpful. But when it comes to like, I need information, Google's still where I go because like, especially if it's something that has a right answer. Like if it's deterministic versus probabilistic, I want to hear about that. Like if it's more like, hey, help me build a career path for someone on my team that's XYZ, could use these areas to improve, is doing really well here. ChatGPT is going to be much better than like a general how to do career pathing article, potentially, because it can have my context to it. But if I'm more like, hey, what are all federal holidays that I need to be aware of? Like that's something I'm going to go to Google. And as specifically though, I find that like ChatGPT doesn't go very deep. And that's why people who like specialize in a field, I'd rather learn from them. Like if I was trying to learn how to like speed up a WordPress site, someone who lives and breathes WordPress and has been like donating their time to the WordPress project, has audited hundreds of sites, they're going to have better advice for me than like whatever ChatGPT's general answers will put out. So I think it also depends on how deep I want to go in my learning.
Yeah. And I guess you could argue that like for that keyword about how to improve the performance of my WordPress site, maybe like the top 10 search results today don't go that deep. And you would still want to go and, find that actually valuable resource, which I think Google wants to do. If we actually do create that more helpful guide, Google would probably eventually surface it to the top of search results, I hope.
Hopefully. I think though, I play with this concept. I call it the two audience concept. And there's sort of like the people who just want to skim, scan, be out of there. And there's people who want to read every word and deeply learn. And I think part of search is playing to both of those audiences, like instant gratification and then let me invest my time. And I think that there's certain things that are just required in order to rank in search and be a search result that works for the unengaged and those that want to deeply engage. And so, I can't tell you the amount of time we've seen people pour into a really great article that just doesn't hit those like SEO constraints, and then it doesn't get much traffic. And I also don't think every article should get a lot of traffic from search, because I think you have to dumb down some of what you're saying. Like if the smartest, best written content that was super informative all ranked well in search, Substack would have a ton of traffic, like just massive amounts of traffic, but it doesn't, because it requires you to be deeply engaged. It may require context from previous essays or newsletter posts. But like search is really like, let me jump in with zero context and get the answers that I need. And I think there's a very formulaic way or like a very constrained way of writing so it works for that medium.
I was chatting with one of our customers the other day and they were trying to rank for like a very evergreen keyword. I think it was like, what is software deployment? But they'd written like a thought leadership piece for it. And so like the keyword was clear. It was software deployments. And they had some great info in there about their opinions on software deployments and how it's changing. But I basically said to them, like, you need to add some of the SEO flavor to this, like, software deployment best practices and, what is a software deployment? And so it's kind of like a balancing act between like creating something that has the characteristics of what Google thinks it wants, and then also to like injecting that opinion, that unique idea that you have about software deployments. Well, JH, it's been a busy year since we last talked. There's been some algorithm updates, like the helpful content update at the end of 2023, and then in March, and then in August. So it's been a pretty volatile year for folks creating web pages for search engines. I guess a couple questions here. Do you have any quick thoughts on the most recent algorithm updates or the August update, for example? It looks like a lot of sites that maybe previously got hit are bouncing back. Do you have any thoughts there?
Yeah, I'd say my thoughts are filtered through working with about 24 sites right now on a continuous basis and having access to data from over 100 different sites. And what I'll say is we definitely saw some customers see a boost in their overall traffic. And then I'd also say customers that are executing a very similar playbook saw some traffic go down pretty significantly to like their quote unquote SEO content. And what I'd say is like, it's always interesting when I see people have very strong feelings about these updates or have a lot of conviction about how the update works or what the right move is, because as far as I can tell, I'm looking at a pretty decent sample size and the results of who was impacted. It's like the people that are doing better, were they doing anything meaningfully different than the people who got, hit? Not really. And I feel like there's a lot of collateral damage with this update, both. And like, I don't know what the opposite of collateral damage is, but just like the victors of this update. I don't think they necessarily did something to win. I feel like the winners and losers on this one, it's unclear why to me still. And I've read the theories about like brand search and like one of the sites that got hit has a massive, massive amount of brand search. So I don't think that's it. I'd say it's getting much harder to understand why an update happened and why you were impacted by it. I'd say to the people that won, what we've told them that we work with on a regular basis is, this is great. Like, we like this traffic, but we didn't do anything for it. So it could go away just as quickly as it came. And we shouldn't pat ourselves on the back because Google changed how it's evaluating our site. We need to keep doing what we're doing. We need to execute as well or better than what we've done to keep this up. But don't mistake Google rewarding us with more traffic in the short term as like a sign that long term we're going to win, that we're doing the right thing. And then for the folks, I think of one site in particular that we work with that got hit, it was like, what can we do to future proof our SEO strategy? But at the same time, you're not doing anything wildly different than what other folks who are winning are doing. So I think I don't know how to feel about this update. I'm sure there is some underlying patterns that I'm not seeing right now. But I think it's sort of a keep calm and carry on thing. Like, if you are creating content that is not some helpful content update thing, but like genuinely helpful to your audience and that they're going to find it through other channels, let alone like not just search, keep doing that because it's valuable to the user. But this last update, it kind of threw me for a loop because it's like, there was no clear, hey, this person's doing this and that's bad. Very different from when it started my career, when Panda rolled out, it was like, oh yeah, we can't be doing this. Like, there was very clear patterns with Panda and Penguin. With the most recent core algorithm update, I haven't been able to piece it together of like why certain people won and why certain people lost. I think everything's just getting more complex. And really, to put a neat little bow on this, search used to be about very simple inputs led to very simple and like straightforward outcomes. And I think that feedback loop is getting muddied a bit. And it's not as easy to see your inputs leading to direct outcomes.
I generally totally agree with that point. I remember back in the day, not that long ago, maybe like 10 years ago, I used to be able to build a bunch of links to just a single URL on my website and like it would move the needle. And then eventually like it didn't. I agree with your point that like it's getting harder to diagnose like what you might have done right or wrong, or maybe you just didn't do anything wrong and you got unlucky. With this most recent update, one of the things I noticed is that a lot of the sites that got hit had like within the last like 6 to 12 months rolled out like pretty aggressive programmatic SEO strategies, which are like, they called it programmatic SEO. I just would call it spam. Like, think like, large numbers of like doorway pages, like hundreds or thousands of them. And then all of the sudden, like proportionally, these doorway pages made up like, 75% of their website. So there's been like a few of our customers where I basically said to them like, hey, 75% of your website is now a very low quality doorway page. Maybe that's it. But yeah, and I think a lot of the sites that had been doing well up until this most recent update, I maybe have started to plateau or move down slightly. That's what I've seen.
This was the first update where I really saw, because like every company we work with typically has a fair amount of employees, is well funded, and has a brand. And this was the first time I saw an update strongly negatively impact a customer. I've definitely seen like fluctuation, but I'd say it's hard to tell sometimes like, did we just like go down 2 positions because someone else won or did we go up because someone else lost? This is the first time where I was like, oh no, we clearly got hit or we clearly like, hit a new record. And it was just interesting that this has moved into the world of like legitimate businesses. Cause usually when I think of companies getting, it's like an affiliate site for air fresheners, or it's like a dog directory, something that's like not a real business with employees. And so this was interesting to me.
No, that is a really interesting observation. Yeah, because it feels like for the last year, it's been the affiliates of the world, like the Mediavine sites of the world, and startups that have brands have largely done well throughout like September and March. And now like the whole SEO world is saying you need to build a brand. Maybe that's just something we business people should do regardless. But yeah, no, that's a good observation. It does feel like for the first time in the last like year and a half, sites that are real brands have started to feel some volatility. That's a really interesting point.
The brand thing, though, I think it just makes everything easier. And that's what, like, I think, like, when I see and I have all the respect to them, but like the basement dwelling, like affiliate SEOs that sometimes pop up on the Twitter and tell me that I'm wrong. The thing that I think that people don't understand about like brand and why brand matters is like, I'm someone who buys a lot of software today. And in my personal life, I buy stuff online all the time. It is very unlikely for me to buy from something I've never heard of before. Like if I'm searching for something, I'm like, oh, that's a cool table, let me see if I can find it from a store that I know. Like I think 10 years ago, like the internet was this like magical place and I didn't know a lot about it. And I was very open to like discovering new brands and new stores and new experiences through the online world. And now it's like, unless someone says, oh, you got to go there, it's really good. Like if I hear about it from word of mouth, great. If I know the brand already and I trust it through however I would get awareness for that brand, awesome. But like discovering a net new website and brand and being like, oh, let me trust this with my bookkeeping. Like it's very rare. I'd say like my guard is up more than ever. And I think brand allows me to lower that guard, especially if I have like repeated exposure to that brand and have heard good things about it. So I think having solid brand allows for not just like better SEO performance apparently, but for like actual conversion and like being willing to opt in to future messaging or to buy.
Yeah, no, totally. I joked with Matt the other day, my co-founder. I was like, Matt, when's the last time you bought something with like a Google search? And he's like, I don't do that. And I just know what tools I want to buy. Maybe I shouldn't say that so loudly because a lot of our customers are trying to compete for some transactional keywords. But maybe transactional keywords are different. Like maybe if somebody actually is like looking to compare tool A versus tool B, maybe that is going to help them. I'm not sure.
I think like transactional, at least in the B2B world, this is all I can really talk about. But I think like where I am discovering it's much harder to compete is in the mid-market. But if you're SMB and like your buyer is like just started a small business, needs to get, let's just roll like the bookkeeping, needs to get a bookkeeper, they don't really know where to turn. Or if you're enterprise and you have to go with procurement, I remember when I was in-house, I wanted to buy an SEO tool and they were like, oh, you can't just like buy the thing you want to buy. And I was like, wait, what? And they're like, yeah, you need to get quotes from at least 3 vendors, have them all go against each other. We need to get contracts to be able to review from all of them. And then we can tell you which ones you can move forward with. And I was like, well, I don't like that. And I literally did just go and like, alternatives to SEO clarity and like looked up a few other things. And I was like, okay, these are the other 3. And it became a thing where I was no longer the person and buying I was just one stakeholder in like a large purchasing process. So I think in the enterprise, those transactional keywords can be really valuable if you need to build out that like RFP process. And in the SMB side, if you don't have exposure, you don't know where to go, it could be great. But in the mid-market where it's like they go to conferences, they have peers, they've been in the space for a while, I find that really tough to compete in.
I've seen one of our customers recently who I won't name, but they have like a very niche software product, and the competition to their software product is a human, like a manual human employee. And they don't really have any like software competitors. Like they only compete against like outsourced human labor. And so I think for them, like some of these keywords are quite interesting because it's literally just a choice of like software tool that didn't exist 2 years ago or a human. Whereas like if it's a very like commoditized software space, like there's 500 tools that compete against SEO clarity, maybe it's a little bit different.
This wouldn't be an AI solution, would it?
every B2B software company has an AI solution.
It's funny though, because I mean, like the amount of times, and for my customers that listen to this, when you've requested this, it's been okay, but it's those other customers where it's not. The amount of people that want to rank for the term AI agent, and I'm like, nah, that's like really broad and not helpful. We need to like drill down a little bit. It's been interesting. I do think though, with like, we talk about like informational terms and everything, like I do think AI, the amount of education that needs to happen around it is so large. It honestly has like created like a new pocket of search. And that's been very interesting. There's a lot of opportunity there, but yeah, it is. I don't think buyers really care about if it's AI or not. I think they just want to know, does it help me do my job? I'd say one thing that's been interesting, we work with one company. It is a services business. We're trying to get a little bit outside of pure SaaS right now, just because it's tougher. Trying to diversify the client portfolio a little bit. And they are competing with like a service down the street, and they are not down the street. And that has, I will say Google loves a local business provider that is down the street. And I think what I am seeing is it's getting harder to operate as sort of this like, oh, we're just going to scoop up all the business. Like we're just going to do SEO, get in front of everybody else. Like I think Google's really trying to give SMBs that are physically situated near to where the searcher is a leg up. And I found it much harder to crack through with like online, whatever it could be, whether it's like, I don't know, like an interior design firm that has like contractors all over the place and they could come to your house and do it. Unless they have like physical brick and mortar, I find it really hard to compete. The one business I'd say that I just think is like brilliant now that I understand the accounting space just a little bit more clearly. H&R Block has an office like every 50 feet. If you Google H&R Block near me, they have all of these local offices, and it's like, oh, like there's a reason why they have 2, 3, 4-person offices all over the place. And it allows them to be right next door all the time. And I think that these online businesses that are essentially designed to undercut local businesses, Google's kind of figured that out, and they are propping up the local brick and mortar independent retailers a bit more than they used to.
That's interesting. So this company would compete in that exact scenario you've described. By the way, for Charleston, South Carolina tax return prep, H&R Block is number one.
They know what they're doing.
They know what they're hey, if the head of SEO at H&R Block is listening, you should come on the pod at some point. But speaking of SEO clarity and tools, you've kind of transitioned to my next question, which is about content optimization tools. I've been thinking a lot about this. I think like back in like 2017, 2018, when content optimization tools like were first created, like let's think like ClearScope, Surfer. I think they were both like 2017-ish. I think they worked really well because I also think it was at that point that like maybe Google's algorithms were a little bit simpler in how they judged what was like a high quality piece of content. And so something I've been thinking a lot about is like, you can get a really high score in a content optimization tool, but that doesn't mean that the content's any good. Like actually the content could be really bad and you could still get like an A in a content optimization tool. And so are you still using content optimization tools as part of like your SEO strategies that you're deploying for clients?
This is a very timely question. Yeah, we do. The gamification aspect of like a score that you need to hit, specifically like whether it's an A++ in ClearScope or a score in positional or a score in even Ahrefs' new thing that I think kind of makes everything a little bit more ambiguous. Doesn't try and get you to use like the exact term. Either way, when you gamify the experience for somebody and you tell them it's better to have more, it's going to influence the writing very significantly. We try and frame it as like, this is a topical gap analysis. And, you know, if you don't mention anything else that everyone else is talking about, it's likely off topic. Like you're likely missing some pretty important ideas. But just because it has 1 or 2 terms that you're not using, that doesn't mean that you can't rank or that your article is incomplete. I think it's just like another source of information to consider when you write. But, you know, like I said, we're not the ones doing the writing. So I think when you pass a writer or a content manager these tools and say like, hey, these are all the ideas that it says are relevant, as you write, you're going to get a score. And as you include more of these, it's going to make your score higher. They're going to change what they're doing. I really respect what Ahrefs has done. I think it's very smart because they are abstracting like the raw topics and not just making it like plug these in and your writing will be better. They're trying to more lean on like concepts and ideas rather than like subtopics, which are essentially just another way of saying keywords to mash in. So I'd say if you can instruct the writer to reference it, but not let it run the show, it can be really helpful. But I'd say there is an incentive to just let that thing take the wheel. And that's when content, I think, starts being a little bit more low quality. And I'd rather have someone like push back and be like, well, we actually didn't mention this. And like, this is the biggest emerging topic when I go to conferences that everyone's talking about in relation to this thing. And having your own ideas and your own inputs versus saying like, because the big thing about these tools is that they are looking back. They're looking at what's already ranking, and some of that content's going to be fairly old. So it's only going to show you how people have already written about it and not where the future of that topic is going to go. And I think if you only utilize those tools to inform how you're going to write, you're only going to write more of the same that's already out there. And there should be something dramatically new or different about what you're putting forth. And that's something you're not going to get from those tools.
Yeah, no, totally. And to push back, to play devil's advocate for the very crowded content optimization tool space, as someone who provides a content optimization tool myself, I think if you use some of these tools like surface level, you could probably go a lot deeper. Like, for example, like whenever I look at like keyword suggestions, like within a content optimization tool, I often allow them to like inform me as to what I might be missing from my piece that like I probably should have a section for or around. And so when I use a content optimization tool, like I don't try to just like stuff a keyword in there just to hit it, but I instead look at like the keyword suggestions to try to say like, oh, Nate, like these are these keywords that you're not hitting, but like it probably makes sense to have a section that would naturally address like this topic within the piece to make it more helpful or more comprehensive. But again, I don't know that that's how most people use content optimization tools.
Can I push back on that real quick? You're so in the weeds, dude. Like you are an expert in your craft. And, you know, when you are building a content function inside of like a larger company and there's like 3 or 4 content writers, maybe one like senior person, editorial person, like 3 junior people, some contractors in the mix as well, they're not going to have that level of sophistication and nuance that you do. And that's why I think like we, with every time we introduce someone to ClearScope, someone on my team who used to, you know, be a part of the professional services team at Market Muse has training videos about like how to use this, how to not use it, things to watch out for. And like what really brings this home for me is I was working with one company in a very dry space. The team was really fun though. Like it was like the most boring software I've ever worked on, but the team was actually like a laugh riot. And it's funny how that works. But the guy who was drafting this like, you know, piece that articulated what their category is, he referred to it as buzzword bingo. He's like, and then I take it to the buzzword bingo machine and then I pop those things in there and then we go, and I was just like, oh, that's like totally the wrong way of looking at it. And I tried to explain that to him and he was like, but you're telling me if I include these things, we're going to do better in search. And this article exists to get traffic in search. So why wouldn't I use every single one of these things? And I was like, I see what I've done here. I've created like a little monster. They're very powerful tools. They're very helpful tools. Like I constantly use this example. Like if you're writing about the history of Apple computers and you never mention Steve Jobs, the iPhone, or Cupertino, like there's something wrong with your article and it probably shouldn't rank in search. And it's going to tell you if you type in history of Apple computers, like those 3 terms should come up in any content optimization tool. But where do you differentiate and how do you make it unique? That's the thing. And it's also similar to like writers using ChatGPT to bust out their SEO content, which I think is leading to some real issues right now. And not like an algorithm ranking issue. It's just, what's your moat? Like if you're going to use these content optimization tools or ChatGPT or a combination of the two, like how are you doing something that everyone else can't do? It's my same issue that I have with link building services. If your solution to we're going to increase our domain authority is I'm going to hire this service and they're going to get me 10 links a month and we're going to get 10 links a month every month after that, why can't all your competitors just go hire a similar service and do the exact same thing? Like, what is your moat? What is your unfair advantage? And oftentimes it's like your brain, your expertise, your lived experience. And if you're not creating room to put that into your content won't have a moat and it probably won't stand the test of time. So that's my issue with many aspects of SEO is we're always trying to like divorce the critical thinking, divorce the effort, make it this like factory assembly line process where you can just pump it out and grow. And I think Google is very aware of that and wants to literally stop that from happening and only reward content that is like deep thought has gone into it to make it unique and worthwhile. And for like all the incentives are to not do that in order to grow.
It seems like companies use these tools as like a crutch for not wanting to do the harder work, maybe at times, like to check a box to say, hey, it's a good article, I got an A, and to move on, versus creating something that maybe would take 2 or 3 times as long to create.
I think it's just tougher, man. Like I worked for one company where I worked for a very smart and savvy growth leader. And he was like a big paid media, CRO, mathematics. Like he wrote a formula one day on a whiteboard of like how our conversion rate works and like what the levers we can pull. And I was just like, I've never seen anything like this before. This is so much deeper, more well thought out than I've ever seen. And he worked with me, and I only stayed at this company for a pretty brief period of time, but he worked with me to figure out like, what are our guardrails for SEO content? We actually used a report from Search Metrics that was like a correlation analysis of like the type of content that performs well. And it was literally like, so every post must have these things. And we put together this list and it was like, there's no deviating from the list. We're going to build a function. This is how we do. And I honestly think like rules are great, but you need to break those rules if there's good reason. And so like, in order for me to be a part of this larger growth team, I had to have a very rule-based system for SEO content. And we didn't have topic modeling. This was a long time ago. So topic modeling tools or topic content optimization tools weren't around then. But if it was, he would have been like, okay, nothing below the target score. Like we always hit it just would have been like another rule to add in. And I think that's why, because you have nuance and you have deep experience. So you can say like, hey, maybe this isn't the right topic. Or, oh, the reason why this one's in here is because like it's fractured intent and there's some articles that aren't irrelevant to what we're really trying to match for. So like, we're going to ignore those suggestions. But in a larger organization, I didn't have the ability to say, oh, for this one, we're just not going to follow the rules. And so that's where I think you get into trouble.
Yeah. No, and I do agree. It feels like often content optimization tools are like bought up here and then pushed down to the rest of the team. So I do think they're valuable. Like I wouldn't offer one and I wouldn't like sell one if I thought they were totally non-valuable or harmful. But whenever a customer tells me that they got like a 100 in our tool, which is like the highest possible score that you don't need to get to, 85 is great. But every time someone tells me they got a 100, I'm almost like worried. I'm like, oh no, like what
about
did they do?
Auditing tools? So to take it outside, it's the same. All these tools have the same issue where it's like,
I hate auditing tools. I mean, it drives me like and again, as someone who offers an auditing tool that like gives you a score, people are like, Nate, how do I get a 100? And I'm like, you don't have to get a 100. It's like, sorry to cut you off there, JH. You just got me started.
Yeah, no, dude, you're good. And I'd say it's like, it's interesting because we'll be at like a 98 and it's like, oh, everything else is a micro optimization after this.
Yeah.
But that 100 would look really good in front of my leadership team. So like, what do we do to get that? And I'm like,
right.
Do you really want to adjust all your title tags so they're 2 characters less and cuts off your branding? Like, it doesn't matter. Like, just ignore it. But I think, again, anytime you give someone a score and you gamify what they're doing, you run the risk of creating perverse incentives that are going to lead them to activity that doesn't create value, but from an optics perspective is beneficial. And that's the real issue at play.
You know what score I really don't like? Is domain rating or like whatever you call it, depending on the SEO tool you're using. Because like certain people will say to me like, Nate, like our domain rating like hasn't changed, but like the traffic's up. Like, should we be concerned? And I'm like, no, like I wouldn't be concerned.
When I'm evaluating a site at a high level, like if we get a lead, I'm like, oh, could we work with the site? I'll take a quick look, but I'm more attuned to looking at like the overall count of backlinks and then going through it and being like, are they relevant versus a domain. I don't like any metric that is a black box that I don't have a lot of insight into. And I remember Not to throw shade at the Moz team, and this was many, many years ago, but I remember foolishly, I made like DA a metric that I presented in competitive analysis. And then the team was like, okay, so what do we need to do to increase our metric? What do we need to do to grow domain authority so we're at the same level as our competitors? And I was like, well, that comes with more links. And then there's this period where Moz would not live update their link index. And there was like these Mozscape updates that would happen. And I remember they had a few failed rollouts. It didn't update for several months. And
It's like a year, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was like a year. I was being generous. I was being, but like it made me look worse because I was like, this metric's really important. We need to improve it. And then the way to build up the metric became pause. Like the data for the metric essentially paused for almost a year. Let's just say tomorrow Ahrefs recalculates their domain rating score and you drop 10 points. Like nothing on your site changed, but now this score isn't the score that you knew. At a high level, if you understand it, it's helpful at a very high level, but trying to focus on it or trying to influence it, I think leads again to like just the wrong incentives.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, scoring is with our product has been something like we've constantly had to iterate on and think about because everybody wants to get a 100 out of 100 regardless of the tool that it is. And when I tell folks like they don't need a 100 regardless of the tool, like they seem like our product must be broken then. But I don't know. I feel like if you do 85% on all SEO things, like you're probably going to be successful. I don't know. That's how I've always thought about it. But
the one place where I'm really finding these monitoring tools to be really helpful, and I'd say it's SEO is here to stay for the long term is something I definitely believe. But as a business owner, I really want to diversify our offerings. We're getting deeper into HubSpot. We're getting deeper into analytics and reporting and generative AI and all these other areas. But one area that I find really helpful is the record of change, like basically becoming like a system of record for how the website changes over time is absurdly helpful. And it doesn't matter if you're using WordPress or Webflow or a headless CMS, people break stuff all the time. They accidentally de-index things all the time. And getting sort of a daily feed of like, how has our website changed? And then just kind of playing like janitor or babysitter has been immensely valuable for some of the companies we work with. So I think like there's a layer of like marketing site visibility or like observability with these tools that it's not so much about just like SEO metrics, but like, does the thing work? Does your website work? Like we've caught companies breaking their demo page before. And it's like, oh yeah, that's like a major issue, but there is no alerting system for you for that. So I find that if you understand how to look at those reports, view the changes and can pinpoint the things that are actually like signal of a bigger issue, whether it's observability for K8s or observability for a marketing website, you can find the root cause and repair it pretty quickly. So I find that really valuable. I don't really care about the score.
There's an interesting SaaS business here, marketing observability, just like productize exactly what you've described and maybe plug into all the different tools to do that like change analysis. And like with the clients you work with, they probably have like 15 people on the marketing team and any one given person might make a change that has a big impact and they don't know it. And so, yeah, no, that's interesting.
I mean, you can, let's say a company launches a new brand and then they push that staging site live, but the no index tag was added manually. When are they going to find that out? A tool that I loved that we stopped using because it got bought by another company, Content King, was just phenomenal because it was like real time crawling of your marketing site. And that was the stuff that we uncovered. The thing I loved, I was talking with my team about this earlier today, they had a prioritization score. And so they'd be like, these are the really important pages. It'd be like the page with the most internal links, essentially. And that was like, hey, like these important pages have been impacted or like these important pages changed. And the thing I really loved about that tool was that it prioritized its alerts. And I find that like with big websites we work on, if everything is an emergency, nothing is an emergency. So I really love that prioritization that they offered you because it allowed you to just focus on what really matters instead of diving into the stuff that you can just let burn. That was a really powerful tool. And I do find that like the tools that SEO people have, whether it's a tool like Positional, whether it's Screaming Frog, Sitebulb, Ahrefs, whatever, There's a guy on my team that came from a QA background. He's like, these tools are better than the QA tools that we had. Like, granted, they did different functions, but on a front end perspective, like I can learn more about how the site's functioning and its issues than like the other tools that we had. So I think there's real power there.
Yeah. And for all of our listeners, all of the companies we've mentioned on this podcast thus far, I think we've mentioned every SEO tool. They're all sponsors of this episode of the Optimized podcast. But yeah, no, check out Positional if you haven't already. To all the listeners, we're pretty cool. JH, this has been a blast, but I have to pull myself back to the outline because I wrote down a few questions that I do really want to ask you. A few things. So a question that I want to get your thoughts on are, when does it make sense for a startup to invest in SEO? It's a question I get asked a lot. And I think it depends, like a lot of things in SEO. But I'd be curious to know, like, when do you think it makes sense for, like, let's say a B2B technology startup to take SEO seriously?
It's a great question. And I wish I could just have like a clean answer for you, but I'd say one, it really depends on the founding team's skill set. And if there is someone on the founding team that has a content and SEO background, they should leverage that early. But that's to like build an audience, not to drive conversions. I'd say really when it makes sense to fully invest in SEO to grow a pipeline, you got to have some product market fit or be pretty darn close to approaching it. If your product is still like embryonic, you're just going to drive people that are like not happy with they're going to expect way too much out of the tool in that point. So I'd say waiting till like you can essentially do like cold email or go to a conference and get users that stick with the platform, like having your product in a place where you can onboard users, have them be happy, have them stick with the product and have like a solid LTV over time. That's when I'd say it makes more sense to add fuel to the fire. But again, like if it's not your skill set, you're gonna have to hire an agency in order to run that function. And that I think just like that takes your time away. So it's like if it's not a core skill set to the founding team, much later than if it is. And so like I love what mint.com did where they were getting more SEO traffic than like all their competitors had combined, I think, before they even launched. But that's because Noah Kagan knew what he was doing. But if you don't have that kind of skill set, you should wait until it slots into your go-to-market motion like nicely. It's like, oh, the traffic's coming to our site, it's converting, we have happy customers, let's get more traffic, let's get more customers. That is usually like post-Series A. It can be pre-Series A, but usually it's post-Series A. And I'd say the thing that's very like a little bit of difficult mental gymnastics for founders that I often tell them is like the longer you wait, the easier it gets in terms of seeing faster ROI. It still takes a long time to build up, but the more you wait, every year you wait, you're going to see faster returns. But you don't want to wait so long that you're essentially competing in an overly saturated space. So there's no perfect answer here, but I think it depends on your skill sets, your approach to product market fit, and how much demand there is for your category overall.
I love that. Yeah, that one customer I was describing earlier, they're in a place where, you know, they acquire customers from outbound email, conferences. Like their business is clearly working, but they don't have an SEO channel yet. And so it sounds like they're kind of that right fit where everything else is going right in their business. And if they were to increase traffic to the website, it would probably increase the number of dollars they make, given everything else works pretty well. The next question I want to ask you is on programmatic SEO. It seems like it's fad. I like programmatic SEO. Don't get me wrong. Like, I think it can be fantastic for companies where it makes sense. But I found that like, I've been getting asked about programmatic SEO like every single day lately. And for 98% of the startups that ask me about it, it doesn't feel like it makes sense, or there like obviously isn't a clear use case for it other than just like mass producing AI content to try to hit long tail keywords. Are your customers asking you about programmatic SEO? Is it like a fad? What's going on there?
Oh yeah, we get asked about it all the time. And I think it's because it sounds so simple and easy and it's too good to be true. I put it this way. If you have a proprietary data set, if you have unique data that you can surface on these pages, similar to like the Zillow Zestimate or like the walk score, like then that gives your page something unique. But if your goal with programmatic SEO is to chat GPT your way to 5,000 pages that don't provide unique value, I don't think you're in for a really good time. I think Google also is clearly very aware that you can use these tools to mass generate content. And I don't actually think they care if it's written by a human or if it's written by a robot, because back in the day, you could use, I think it was called like Olark. It was what Upwork was before it was Upwork. It was like Olark and Writers Access, I think, were the two companies. And you could get, Elance. Yes. Just took me back 15 years. You could get the worst content ever written for like $7 a post. And it was unhelpful, just designed to trick search engines, yada, yada, yada. You can do that with a human, or you can do it with ChatGPT or Anthropic or whatever. Doesn't matter. It's like, does it actually help? So if you have a data source of great, unique, valuable information that makes sense for every zip code or every city or every state or every town, do it. But if you don't, and you're just trying to wedge yourself in there, then I don't think that's the right move. And especially with these companies like, oh, we're going to do programmatic SEO on like 50 pages. It's like, well, 50. Why don't you just let a human do it? Like, make it good.
Yeah, no, totally. JH, this has been so much fun. And if it's okay with you, I've got some lightning round questions. Does that sound good?
I love a lightning round.
All right, cool. Well, first, you mentioned WP Engine. You used to work there. I feel like on Twitter lately, I've been seeing this like WordPress.org versus WP Engine war unfolding. Do you have any quick thoughts or anything you'd like to share with this audience?
All I will say, and I hope she hears this, Heather Brunner, the CEO of WP Engine, I've worked for a lot of CEOs, worked with a lot of CEOs. She is the single best leader I've ever worked with. And I am confident WP Engine is going to come out strong here. All I'll say is I have the utmost respect for Jason Cohen, Heather Brunner, the whole WP Engine team, and being a part of what they were building. I think there's some talk about them. Well, they were specifically called Cancer by the founder of WordPress. And I will say, when I was at WP Engine, a big part of my job was not just helping, WP Engine hit some revenue number, but evangelizing WordPress and making it accessible to the enterprise. And I think that is some nuance that's being lost in this current conversation. It's clearly going to play out in the courts. It's gotten pretty litigious and pretty spicy. But I will say that I think WP Engine is a phenomenal company. When we see companies running on WP Engine, we just know it's going to be easier to support that website. And granted, I'm clearly biased. I was a member of the team. But I think that there is quite a bit of revenue going around with all of these hosts. WP Engine's trademark has always, from what I understand, always been fine with the rules with how WordPress states how you should say things. The WP was always fine. There's WP Beginner, WP Rocket, but it seems like because they don't contribute the moving goalpost of how much Automatic says they should contribute, that they're now being litigated against for quote unquote trademark infringement. It's all very suspect. And I have a feeling WP Engine is going to come out of this pretty strong. I think anytime you text someone that they have a certain amount of time to accept your job offer, and if not, you're going to go to their investors and the press and the company and say that you were interviewing, you're usually not in the right. So clearly I'm biased, but that's my take there.
Yeah, I saw that text message and I was like, what? The best part about it, my favorite part, was I saw in the release when they offered to like pay like, I don't know, 30 grand or like 6 months salary. Like he said that one employee joined like 2 days earlier and then took the severance package. And I'm like, good for that employee. I hope they just walked away with like 100 grand after 2 days. So on Saturday, I was talking to a friend. He runs an SEO agency. They've been in business for like 10 years, work with a lot of startups. And he told me that they were kind of struggling. It seemed like maybe it's been a down year for them. And he wasn't that optimistic about next year either. And so my question here is like, do you think we're going to see like consolidation in the number of like SEO agencies that exist, or maybe in other words, is it a tough time to be an SEO agency right now? What are you seeing?
Kind of going back to our earlier conversation about perverse incentives. And when you're told if you hit this metric, then you're good. I think for a long time, SEOs tried to boil it down to what are the simplest inputs that we can provide for growth. And I think now it's really about over delivering and going the extra mile. And if your system is just, auto generated briefs, exports from Ahrefs, exports from whatever tool, and not really putting a lot of critical thinking and human effort behind it, yeah, I think you're in some trouble. But there's a lot of agencies that I know of, like OGM or Omniscient, that just do, great work and really do think about from like how do we help this company from a first principles perspective, not just how do we hit some metric in some SEO tool, or how do we hit some new high traffic number. So I think if you have a rinse, wash, repeat process that is not adjusted per account and is literally just this like factory line assembly style SEO, yeah, I think it's going to be a hard year. And I'm not going to say it hasn't been a harder year for us. Like, I spend way more time on sales. We have to work harder on every account in order to grow it and keep it over time. But I think that for a long time, SEO was like way too easy, and it brought out, it was just considered easy to like grow an SEO agency. There was nothing really special to it. You would like go and do article marketing and directory submissions and then suddenly get more traffic. And now we actually have to do real marketing. But yes, the whole landscape has gotten harder. The internet's gotten more competitive. People like expect more out of content today. But I welcome that change because I think it allows us to mature our offering and provide actually a more valuable service. So while it is a struggle, I welcome that struggle because I think it's going to make us all better.
And link building agencies specifically, you mentioned link building earlier. I've seen a lot for some reason of like work from link building agencies in the last like month or two. And it's like surprised me like how low quality some of these link building agencies are. Does it make sense to work with a link building agency if you're a startup?
I'll put it this way. I think that tactical link building, like manual link building, can be very valuable if executed well and you are getting links from the sites that your customers already read and trust. But that's very rarely what I see. Typically what I see is things that look paid, people who are doing like guest posting submissions that work in 4 links to 4 totally different things. Sometimes the anchor text doesn't even make sense. There's a lot of like private backlink networks spun up by generative AI type things going on. Typically, if your company is not generating links on its own, there's a bigger issue there that needs to be uncovered that no link building agency is going to solve. That being said, I have a ton of respect for teams like the Fractal team, the Siege Media team that do these sort of like well thought out campaigns that generate links. I'm not going to call it digital PR. I think digital PR is some weird thing that the British invented that doesn't really exist and is just like a roundabout way of building irrelevant links to your website 9 times out of 10. And it was, I don't know if the British invented it, but they sure do love it.
They do. They love it.
They love
it too.
It's interesting. I used to work for a British agency, and I think that the British view SEO as like very much like a tactic to be gamed, and links are part of that. So it's just easier to invest. And they have much more localized press in the UK. So I think it's easier to get relevant press to like your little borough or whatever. But I typically tell companies that unless the links are really good and unless they're driving referral traffic and they're on sites that you yourself would visit, you should probably cancel that retainer.
I saw a really funny one the other day. I actually wrote about it in one of our blog posts. There's a company called Betway. They're like a UK gambling site. Yeah. You can bet on horses, anything you want. And they did an article on the best fish and chips shops in Ireland. And they like ranked a whole bunch of the best fish and chips restaurants in Ireland. And it actually worked. They got some pretty good backlinks from local media for their rankings on fish and chip shops. But to your point, like those are totally irrelevant links and probably not that helpful from an SEO point of view.
So I know it's a little bit different, but if you look at like the link trajectory of Polymarket, which is a site that allows you to bet on like sort of prop bets and things like that, like they are cranking because they're a real brand and they don't need to do the best fish and chips or whatever because they have that brand strength and that natural link acquisition over time. But like, 10 years ago, I was doing that stuff too. I did a map of America's music taste that when I look back on it, is just super cringe. It was fun at the time. It was relevant at the time. Or it wasn't relevant, but I mean, Time Magazine used to have a meme desk or like an infographic desk that you could send infographics to and they'd feature you and give you a link. The internet's kind of matured in a way where these like I don't know, most popular music in each state, and then you try and build links to, I guess, like your local state pages. That is just very hack. And I think Google understands that play as well and discounts it pretty heavily. The issue with link, or the thing that is to the benefit of these link building digital PR agencies, is links are just seen as valuable. So people buy them even though they can't clearly discern what value they're driving. So that's why I think there's a market for these agencies, but I think the value is suspect. Now, there are some really solid link builders out there that can do good work. I'm not discounting them, but I think the majority of the market is building irrelevant links that are not going to drive value for your business. So I'm typically hesitant to bring them on.
Yeah. I did back in the day, I did like a best cities for home buyers one. And like we gave all the towns like badges. And one of the towns like put up a billboard on the freeway with like,
I love
we are
that.
ranked like number 7 best cities for homeowners. And they sent me the picture of the billboard. And I was like, wow, that's a real life backlink. One other funny story, like back in like 2016, it was like a presidential election, and we licensed like a whole bunch of data from Experian and like got like credit scores by zip code. And we did like do Republicans or Democrats have better credit scores? And Experian was so mad. But anyways.
Oh, wow. Wow. I would have been curious to know the answer to that one. But yeah, just going back to when I was at Sear, big credit to Will Reynolds, because he let me do some outside the box stuff. We were working with a company that sold janitorial supplies, and they got hammered by Google updates like Panda, Penguin, all that stuff. And we did a parks cleanup campaign, because we originally started with donating to natural disasters and giving them like trash bags, sanitary gloves, things like that. And then we just started doing like park cleanups, and we bought out a bar and did like a free happy hour for anyone that cleaned up. And it got on, I think, CBS News, but like it was primarily for links. We did get a few out of it, but it was like, that was the stuff that actually helped like get citations, brand name recognition. We eventually got them in CNN for some other stuff, but like that was more legitimate marketing, even though I think it was definitely at the time a little bit opportunistic, than what's the best fast food sandwich in every state.
Digital PR is fun. It is fun. It is. I think it'd be fun to work for a digital PR agency. Maybe, I don't know. Maybe not.
It's fun until the pitch flops. I'll say that. As someone who's had some pitches flop, it's real fun when it works. It is, the lows are low though.
Yeah, highs and lows of working for yourself. You know that. And I guess I have 2 more questions. Like,
sure.
What is the best wine that you've had lately that's like top of mind that comes to mind?
Great question. 1995 Lynch Bage.
That's a Bordeaux, right?
It is.
Red Bordeaux.
Yeah.
Lynch Bage.
That was a gift, and it was a very. Is
that Saint Emilion right there? Did I get that right?
I think it may be. I don't even know. It was a gift, and I opened it up and I was like, well, this is fantastic. Drinking window was very short. It was max, like the flavor changed very dramatically over an hour, but it was a phenomenal bottle of wine.
Polyak.
Oh, yeah, I should have known that.
You went to Italy on your honeymoon, right? Did you drink any good wine over there?
We had to postpone. I owe my wife a trip to Italy. I hope she doesn't hear this. We got to schedule it.
Your wife does not listen to the Optimized podcast.
She listens to every episode and is constantly quoting you around the house.
I knew it. I just didn't want to say it. And then my last question is, how can our listeners get in touch with Growth Plays? What do you guys do? How can they learn more?
Yeah, we're a full service B2B SEO agency, primarily working with SaaS and venture capital funds. Just go to growthplays.com. And for as long as it's around, you can find me on X at JH Scherck on X.
Yeah, you definitely follow JH on X. He's a great follow. And we will put a link to everything we just talked about, except all of the other SEO tools we mentioned in this podcast, in the show notes. JH, thanks so much for coming on. This was a lot of fun.
Thanks for having me.
And that's a wrap. And I just want to thank our sponsor, Positional. They've got what is a pretty awesome tool set for content marketers and SEOs. They've even got a couple tools for social media. We'd love for you to check out Positional and the tool set that we've created over the last 15 months at Positional. positional.com. And you can always reach out to me if you have any questions. My email is nate@positional.com. Whether you've got questions about our tool set or comments and complaints, or even positive feedback about this podcast, I'd love to hear from you. And don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button wherever you are listening to this podcast. Thanks so much for tuning in. Bye.